What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today we'll be going over some portal installation tips for the Honda Talon 1000R. So there's a couple things I want to go over. 4-inch Super ATV portals. The ball joints up top, these guys right here, the most important thing on this front, on the whole front end of the vehicle once you put the portals on there. This supports the weight of the vehicle, okay? The problem is Super ATV doesn't give you enough room to get a socket with an impact in there when you're installing the top ball joint. So what you're gonna have to do is, right, tighten it up with a box end wrench or whatever. And then after that first initial ride, after the machine settles and the suspension settles and all that stuff, you're gonna wanna go back and re-torque that bolt. I did this on mine. After the installation, I drove it around in the yard for probably about 10 minutes, pulled it back into the shop, put it back on the jack stands, and I got probably a whole 1/4 inch turn on both upper ball joints, okay? Down here on the lower ball joint, Super ATV provides their own brand of the ball joints, okay? When you order the kit, they come pre-installed to this backing plate, so there's no need to purchase more of these, okay? You still remain to use the factory ball joint up top. It's fine. Don't worry about replacing it unless it's bad. If it's a bad ball joint, obviously replace it. But how you grease these things, and I got to find the little space between the C-clip here. Let me go to the other side. On this Super ATV ball joint, I'm on the driver's side now. They have this C-clip that's in there, and you can see I'm moving it back and forth right now, okay? So basically what you have to do is, in order to actually get enough grease in these things so that way they don't rust out or bind and have an issue or whatever, these ball joints have preload. You can adjust the preload on these ball joints. And how you do that is there's a little key lined up in one of these holes. Gotta find it. I believe it's in that one right there. But basically what you'll end up doing is you'll slide this C-clip around, line it up with the slot to where that pin is, and take a pick and slide it out. Then you can basically remove this cap, unscrew it, remove the cap, and then just pack a shitload of grease in there. So what I had to do, the Zerk fittings for these ball joints aren't exactly the best in the world. So it kind of limited me on how much grease I was allowed to put in there because of the style of Zerk fitting that's on these ball joints. They use these needle style Zerk fittings so that we have clearance between the CV joint and everything else. So they use these concaved needle style Zerk fittings, and they limit the amount of grease that you can actually put into the ball joint. So I had to take the ball joint apart after I had already installed everything, take the ball joint apart and pack more grease into it. You can do that while it's in the vehicle. It's not going to mess anything up. Jack it up, put it on jack stands, pack it full of grease, and then you're good to go. Okay, so for the brake lines, when you're installing these things, guys, be very careful because you can strip these out, okay? Be sure whenever you start them thoroughly by hand before you put a wrench on them. You will strip them out, and then you will have to either re-tap your ABS module or you'll have to buy a whole new one. But the two brake lines where they go, you've got one here for the passenger side. The one second is the driver's side. The one to the very rear and the one to the very front, they both go to the rear brakes, okay? Whenever you're routing your lines, Super ATV gives you these little C-clip brackets type of thing, these little flange brackets. They're pretty good. They got rubber coating on them. They do their job, whatever. Whenever you're routing your brake lines, make sure that you've got enough slack to allow for full rotation of the tire, full turning rotation. So over here on this other side, so I've got plenty of slack there, and it's cranked all the way to the right. So we've got plenty of slack, no need to worry about that. You don't want too much slack because you could have like a stick or a rock or whatever and get caught up in your brake line and cause a lot of issues. Okay, so with these Super ATV brake lines, Super ATV doesn't actually refer to the brake line part number in the instructions. I wish they would. That'd just be a little bit more clear. How you identify which ones you need to use is you reference this part number with the part number stamp, sticker, whatever, on the box that comes with all of the hardware. That's how you identify which instructions you should be looking for, which obviously you'll be able to tell, like 75 inches and all that's way bigger than these over here. How you identify which rear brake lines to use, obviously you're not going to use the Super ATV, the ones for the Super ATV arms if you don't have the Super ATV arms. It's easy and simple. Grab your tape measure them out. It's very easy to verify. The one that goes on the passenger side is shorter than the one that goes on the driver's side, because the ABS module where they thread into is on the passenger side of the machine. So one's longer, one's shorter. You'll be able to tell. They have 90-degree male fittings, like the factory fittings that go into the ABS module. Okay, for the rear, for the stock arms, it utilizes the factory brake line male fitting. So the 24-inch brake lines from Super ATV will have the eyelet on the one end of the brake line, and then they'll have a female fitting on the other end of the brake line. See, so the rear brake lines, you can see they got the eyelet that goes into the brake caliper, and then they've got a female fitting that connects to this flange with a clip. You see the clip, and the factory brake line is a male fitting. So pretty hard to mess up. It's pretty straightforward. So when you're bleeding these brakes, just be patient. I did one foot, like the first time I bled the brakes, went around all of them, did everything right. The brake pedal was still a little spongy. So what I ended up having to do is just attach a hose to the actual bleeder on the caliper and run the hose down to like a little tray of or like a little cup of brake fluid, and I had to do that to all four of them, and just basically monitor the brake fluid level in the reservoir, and just sit there and keep pumping and pumping until it finally started to stiffen up. Went around and locked all of them back down. Used a lot of brake fluid for that. It's just a tedious process. It's one of the more tedious processes of this installation. Okay. Speaking on the actual brake calipers, Super ATV includes these shims. They give you a whole bunch of them, probably like 10 or 12 of these shims. But what you'll do is you'll use them to space out the caliper away from the actual caliper bracket to line it up with the rotor. When you're doing that, make sure you have everything torqued down to two Super ATV spec, so that way you get a proper measurement. I believe it's going to be different for everyone, right? Everyone's machine is a little bit different, but I believe for this one, I have no shims in the back, and I have one shim on each brake caliper bracket on the front of the vehicle. Something to note too, included in the hardware with this kit, they give you multiple different axle, CV joint axle nuts. So these ones, obviously I have the other ones already installed in the machine, so I can't show you those. But these that are left over, these are for the 2021 and up, I believe. It's the newer style ones. They went to a bigger thread on their nuts. Honda did. So they give you 8 total. You just have to identify which ones are which, but they're fairly easy, because these 2021 and up, they're significantly bigger than the earlier year models. Super ATV also includes a socket for the actual portal hub for the new rotor. Be sure when you torque everything down that you go by Super ATV spec. Use a torque wrench, not an impact, and it will void your warranty if you don't. Okay, you got to torque everything to spec. So last thing I want to talk about is involving the rear suspension on the R with the portals. Super ATV does give you a new aluminum hub which it's basically just like the adapter, so that way the portal bracket can bolt to it. On these, on all the bolts in the kit, if you're threading something into aluminum, look at the instructions, make sure that you're not going to over torque these things, because you do not want to over torque something in aluminum. Strip everything out. Now you're back to square one. You got to get with super ATV and all that, which I doubt they'll even warranty any of that because it's user error. But regardless, these ball joints, they're not hard to get out of the factory knuckle. Just back them off, put the nut, or back them off all the way, loosen them, whatever, thread the castle nut back in there, a couple threads or whatever, and then where you want to hit, you don't actually want to hit the castle nut, but on the actual factory hub, you want to hit in this area, because it's a press fitting, it'll just pop right out, easy peasy. Goes back in there to the super ATV hub. It already has a the concave sleeve in there for this ball joint, so nothing to worry about there. Make sure you torque that down accordingly, because it is one of the key components for all the weight of the machine on the actual rear suspension. The other one is this top A-arm. Not a lot of videos out there talk about it. On the actual stock hub, what you will end up needing to do per the instructions, and for everything else. So on the factory hub, it has an ear similar to this. What you'll need to do, you'll need to take the hub off, bring it over to the bench, and press this bushing out of the factory ear on the hub. Super ATV does provide a tool for that. See, it's kind of indented, but basically what you'll actually end up doing is on the bench, you'll take this sleeve and you'll put it on the actual bushing. Okay, there's two seat clips that you need to remove before you do that, and basically you'll just use a vise. You can back it up with another socket. They talk about it in the instructions fairly clearly. What they do not say in the instructions is that these bushings are brittle. Okay, they're hardened steel. They're it's basically like a collar style, whatever. You can break them. You can chip the collar on the outside, and then you're fucked. So be careful when you install them and when you remove them, because they're a press fit. If you do happen to break it, Honda does not sell this bushing by itself. You have to buy a whole new factory hub, and I believe they're close to $200 a piece, something like that. Just be sure to triple check everything before you start getting things into a bind, because it will break. You will have to buy a new hub. You cannot buy that bushing by itself. Okay, so wheel fitment on this thing. Obviously, I still have the tires that I had previously. If you haven't watched that video, they are 34.5 inch by 9/16 Tarachi Aztec XLs. The wheels are 16 by 7 with a 4+3 offset. Okay, the wheel fitment on these portals, okay, it has to be larger than a 14-inch wheel, and you cannot exceed 5 inches of back spacing due to the portal brackets. You see, I've got 16s with a 4+3 offset, and it's already, I've got about an inch to go. So 5 inches of back spacing is the limit. Future plans. So I want to talk a little bit about the gear ratios too. The gear ratio that I bought it's a 30% reduction in the portals. Super ATV says that with this kit you could fit 37s, and if you get their 3-inch Super ATV spacer lift, it's basically you just put a spacer in between the preload springs and the coilovers or whatever. I don't know if I'll go that far, but they say if you do that, it'll allow for a 38-inch tire. I'll probably end up eventually getting bigger tires for it. I'm probably going to go with the Tarachi Aztecs again, because I mean, I'm biased, but because I've owned them before, or own this set, but I love the way they perform. The mud, sand, whatever you throw at it, The tire does great. I'm not going to be too worried about a little bit of rubbing. Tarachi does not make a 37 in these tires. They only make a 38, so that's what I will be going with. So how it calculates, figuring out what size tire you can run with the gear ratio that you bought. So what you'll do, you'll take the factory tire size, which was 28 inch tires for this machine. It has a 30% gear reduction, okay? So you take 28 times 0.3, and that will give you 8.4. You take 28 and add 8.4 to it, that gives you the tire size that you can run. It's 36.4, if I'm not mistaken. So a 37 or a 38 inch tire is going to be perfect. It's going to be 1 inch larger than the factory tire size, which isn't going to change up the gear ratio. The whole goal is to get back to the factory gear ratio, because with these 34.5 inch tires on there right now, if I'm in low range first gear, pegged out, bouncing off the rev limiter, I'm only going 15 miles an hour. High range first gear is a little better. I topped that one out. That one topped out at 35 miles an hour, I want to say. But high range sixth gear, I can still cruise 45 miles an hour, and I'm not screaming in the RPMs. So it will do for now, but eventually I am going to get a bigger tire. So with these portals, Super ATV has it all over their website too, all of this information, and the gear ratio, tire size calculator. But the factory Talon wheels will not fit on these portals without a 1 inch spacer all the way around. So if you do not have a problem with having a 1 inch spacer on the portals, on the hubs, that's fine, whatever. You can get and you want to keep the factory 15 inch wheels, you can, okay? But you can still run a 15 inch wheel with the 4+3, with a 4+3 offset. Anything bigger than like if you've got a 15x7 and you went with a 5+2 offset, that would probably be the max amount, because these are 16s. Don't pay attention to the diameter, but the offset for these is 4+3, and you can see how close the rim is, or the wheel is, to the actual portal bracket. Back here in the rear, it's the same situation, which, to be honest, it's closer back here than it is up front. You can find all that information on Super ATV's website. It's all there, black and white. What you'll have to do is you'll have to go to Fitment, into the subsections other than the description. After you scroll down, and if you're looking at it, just go to the Fitment and it'll explain everything there. All right, y'all, that wraps up today's video. Hopefully I answered some questions that you might have had. If you have other questions that I didn't cover in this video, ask down in the comments. I will be replying to some of y'all if y'all do have some more questions for me. But anyways, thanks again. We'll catch you on the next one.